is shaking, everybody? Welcome back. We're all back. It's Monday. Spring football starts tomorrow. It's the Overreaction Monday show here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson and Alex Dunlap. Glad to be with you. Do us a solid. Hit that thumbs up button. Smash the notification and subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And I do want to mention, as we do every single Monday, this video brought to you by the amazing people over at rogueshop.com. And not only are the people at Rogue Shop amazing, whether we're talking about Shar or Richard, and if they're in the chat, what's up, people? I think I see Richard right there. They've got a special going on this week, posted over at Orange Bloods for this week right now. If you use the discount code OBTHCA20, I'll put it in the chat. Don't worry, we'll get that taken care of. You get 20% off 3 different products right now. The indoor THCA hydroponic flower, the indoor THCA hydroponic flower big. So there's small and there's bigs, but you get a 20% discount all week long on both of those products and the THCA carts. Yeah, that will be me, I think, before the end of the week is over, maybe even by the end of the morning. Let me put the code in the chat right now. Richard has done it, but I'm going to do the exact same thing. Use that promo code right there and get the hookup again on the indoor THCA hydroponic flower, small and big, and the THCA carts. Just knocked my cart over right there. It may be Overreaction Monday, but I haven't reacted yet or overreacted yet or anything yet, fellas. Spring football starts tomorrow. Part of the conversation today will be question marks that we have about the program, big and small. I did a column on some of those. Anwar wrote yesterday on his Sunday pulpit, players that need to step up, players that he's watching. One of the interesting things that happened, I wrote in my column, fellas, that and Anwar kind of wrote this too, that one of the things that needs to happen in the spring is that Arch Manning needs to be, and by the way, thanks to everybody jumping into the Specs chat. It's already jumping off like we like it on Mondays, and that's right, Alan, smash that like button. I wrote yesterday, and as Anwar did, that Arch Manning needs to be a guy that takes some steps forward this spring, that he's not competing for the quarterback job. That's Quinn Ewers. But you never know, given the state of the Longhorns quarterback health over the last decade plus, whether or not you're going to need your backup quarterback to start a game, 2 games, 4 games, 8 games. The Longhorns have run the gamut of time frames for which they've needed their backup quarterbacks to be ready and counted on. So we both agree, Anwar and I both, Arch Manning's got to get better. The program needs him to take steps forward. And yet one of the conversations that broke out on Orange Bloods yesterday was this notion that if Quinn got hurt and Arch came in and played really well, is there a world out there where Arch Manning takes the job and never relinquishes it? That Anwar, it's just Arch Manning's world, and once he gets on the field and starts doing his thing, there's no looking back. Quinn Ewers be damned. And I'm thinking very specifically about a guy that we play fantasy football with. Bill Biddick is convinced that Quinn Ewers isn't the guy, that Arch Manning really is, that the sooner he gets on the field, the better, and that there is a world where Quinn Ewers is Jalen Hurts and Arch Manning is Tua, and at some point, Quinn Ewers is going to get Jalen Hurtsted, if you will.
A verb.
I think it's crazy. I think all of us are in the agreement that Arch might play and play very well, but will always default back to Quinn Ewers when he's healthy. Is that your position? Am I crazy for thinking that Arch is just going to have to wait till 2025 almost no matter what?
The thing that people forget in that Tua Jalen Hurts conversation, right, is that there was something at stake in the moment, right? And there was something so big at stake that the staff decided to make a move in that moment. If Arch last year, right? Wyoming is a good example, right? A game that they win, they blow out. He doesn't have the great numbers, but they win regardless. They don't bench him versus Wyoming because what's at stake at that moment? So, and I see us. I think the more realistic scenario, and we can talk about in a second, is that, hey, knock on wood, Arch Manning may need to come in if Quinn is catches the flu or something like that. I'll speak something to that effect. But to say that he would get Wally pipped to a certain degree, I just don't know where that's like. That just doesn't seem like a Sark move, right? That doesn't seem him. I'm not quite sure if Arch is ready for that either.
Yeah, the thing is, I agree. Well, Alex, you jump in here. Your initial thoughts on the conversation before we just start jumping into the weeds.
I think that there's only one way I can see that happening. And the way I can see it happening is a very specific set of events. And that set of events goes like, yeah, I'm like on war, man. Just, yep. There's the first deal where Quinn, like on war, says gets the flu or whatever, right?
It's easier. It's easier to get an injury, right?
I'm not saying the other thing, right?
I'm just saying the flu.
Right. Yeah. So Quinn gets the flu. Arch has to come in for a game, and Arch actually in that game in his stead looks awesome, right? He looks great. He looks like $1 million. The fan base is fired up. He wins the football game. The future of the program looks bright, right? Everything looks great. Quinn comes back, and Quinn in an important game begins to really struggle and throw a bunch of picks and stuff like that, right? Then the staff says at halftime, we're coming back out. Arch Manning's the quarterback for the rest of this game, right? Arch comes back, wins the game, something like that. I think at that point, it's if something like that were to happen mid-season, I do think maybe coming into the next game, you'd have the conversation about who starts the next game. I mean, that's a scenario that you could see playing out in your head, right? That's certainly something that could happen. But I think that right there is the only way it does happen. I think that we need to see the genie come out of the bottle a little bit beforehand, but I don't think just seeing the genie come out of the bottle is enough for him to overtake him. I think we'd have to see the genie come out of the bottle. You have to put the genie back in the bottle. You'd have to let Quinn come. So like I said, it's a very specific scenario I'm talking about, but it's the only way I can see it happening, right? I think even if the genie does poke out of the bottle, you got to put him back in, and then if Quinn comes back in and struggles, you say, well, gosh, I've already seen the genie. Let's let it back out of the bottle. So I think that's the only way that it could happen.
Catch, let me ask you this though, before you go too far down that, right? Instead of using, by the way, good thoughts, Alex. Instead of using the Alabama thing, right, which Bill uses, what if it's something that Texas fans have seen firsthand? What if it's Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams? Like, you know what I'm saying? Something. What is that scenario more of a, because that literally that's Red River. That's a Spencer Rattler who came into that season and everyone thought was going to be a first-round pick, right? That was the thought going into that. He struggles in that game and then pulls the trigger. Like, I think that's more of the question of, would Sark do something like that more so than like a national championship game where that's dramatic, right? That's the extreme. That is more, I think, to me, I know you asked us questions, but I asked you that. We saw Lincoln Riley. I think he did that in 2 straight Red Rivers, if I'm correct, because I think he did it before that. I think he benched Spencer Rattler twice. Yeah. I don't think he liked Spencer that much. Come to think of it, that becomes the question more so. If it was a first slow start, second quarter, is Sark the kind of guy that would do what we've seen Lincoln Riley do?
I don't think so. I think about Hudson Card against Arkansas, right? I mean, he still rolled Hudson Card back out into the third quarter in that game. It really took a new level of poor team/quarterback play for him to even come out with the hook for Hudson Card in a game where everybody was calling for it much earlier than it actually occurred. I think I have just two general thoughts on this conversation. One, I guess three after hearing you guys talk. I'll start with the one that I wasn't going to say, but you guys kind of made me think of, which is, when you talk about the Spencer Rattler deal, that extended beyond just the Texas game. He had regressed from what everybody, and you kind of mentioned it, the expectations were that Spencer Rattler was about to take off and go to the moon, and they had this Caleb Williams cat in the background that, very similar to Texas, just needed to wait his turn because it was one first-round draft pick following another. But Spencer Rattler, for the first half of that season, the 2022 season, or actually 2021, I guess, just didn't play like a guy that was on his way to being a first-round draft pick. And as his career has ended, that's not who he is.
Yeah.
So it would take Ewers, I think, really playing an average brand of football at best for weeks before that would even become a discussion. So I wonder in the description that Alex is giving, where, it's a big game, it's not working, you put in Manning, it works. The next week you go back maybe to Ewers, but you've got the shadow of a doubt in your mind. That's hard for me to completely buy into, because you're basically, Quinn Ewers is playing for a lot of things this season, but he's a guy that just won you a Big 12 championship, got you into the playoff.
To be fair, though, I didn't say that things were going bad in the first game. I said Quinn gets the flu the first game and is out. And so Arch has to play and does really well.
Right, but it
isn't like the decision's made twice to take him out and put in. Like the first time, Arch just has to play, right?
I just think they're married to Ewers, and I think that they're going to want him to succeed. They're going to want him to be a high draft choice. This is the conversation that we were having a year ago, which was, we thought it was going to be Ewers' last season. In a world that he comes back, it probably means he wasn't good enough to go pro. And at that point, maybe you need to have a better quarterback on the field anyway. The problem is Ewers played actually above the level that we thought would lead him. I think if you told me a year ago they win if you tell me nothing else other than they play in the Big 12 championship game, he's the Big 12 championship game MVP, they make the playoffs, like, I think Ewers probably would have left. That it didn't happen has created a really unique situation. But if they really thought that there was a competition to be had, then just have the competition. But the one thing that Steve Sarkisian has been pretty adamant about when talking about this publicly is that Quinn Ewers is the starting quarterback. He's been pretty emphatic about it. He was emphatic about it on signing day when asked about it. I think it would take a complete left turn in Albuquerque for him to go in the other direction. I think they're married to Ewers this season. I think they want Ewers to have a big year, go to the NFL, hand it off to Manning. And if something other than that happens, on where the elephant in the room is, your season might be in peril at that point. That I really think in order for that call to be made, Texas will have had to have lost games. And we get to a point where Texas got 2 or 3 losses by November 1st, then maybe anything would be on the table at that point. But that's not the type of team that we're talking about.
At that point, it looks bad that Quinn came back then. Because the way it's looking, because the way it's looking now, they're talking. I'm getting to the point where I think Quinn this year would go in front of like Bo Nix and Michael Penix and stuff. So it's like, and those guys, everybody says they're at least locks for the second round. I think that Quinn might have been able to, as this thing comes full circle, I think Quinn's probably, he wasn't going to be this 3rd or 4th round pick like people were talking about at the time. He could have maybe snuck into the 1st round. So that would be bad. That wouldn't just be bad for Sark and the fans and stuff. Gosh, that would make Quinn think that he made a rough decision coming back.
And I don't think they'll do that to Quinn. Like, I don't. I think that, speaking of genies out of the bottle, the moment that happens, Quinn really can't go pro, probably has to transfer, probably has to go play another year of college football, and has to do it somewhere other than Austin. And I don't think in a million years Sarkisian would want that to happen on his watch. It's funny because a year ago, the idea in the building, because Anwar talked about this a lot, was their perfect scenario was Quinn was great a year ago, goes pro. Malik comes in, plays this season as the starter, looks great, goes pro. Arch takes over in 2025, looks good for a couple of seasons, goes pro, and they live happily ever after. Everybody's in the first round of the NFL draft. Everybody had a great year starting. That isn't the way ultimately it's going to unfold, but I don't think they want to deviate too far from that plan. The only thing that's really changed is that the Malik year of starting is being replaced by another year of Ewers starting, but there's a way they want this thing to go. And if it doesn't go that way, Anwar, internally, it would be a massive disappointment. If you were talking to Sarkisian today off the record and we said, yo, just so you know, by November, you're going to want a different guy on the field, I think he would go, no way. We've got to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen, because that's not great for me. That's not great for Quinn. And it might not even be great for Arch. We need this thing to stick to the plan. And that's why I think the people who are like, no, if and sorry, I'll be the one that steps out and says something other than the flu. If Quinn has an injury similar to the one that he's had each of the last couple of years, so it's a multi-week injury. If Arch were to come in and play fantastic football, I think we would say that's what you expect of Arch Manning. He's the number one player in the country 2 years ago for a reason, but it's still Quinn Ewers' team. He's still going to finish out the season, because anything else is deviating away from Steve Sarkisian's plan. And I have not yet taken Steve Sarkisian, a guy that likes to go adrift from his plan making easily.
Well, that's beyond fair. I mean, it really took, when you bring up the Hudson Card thing, it's not to crap on Hudson. It took not only the performance against Arkansas, but the film review of Arkansas, because the film review against Arkansas is what really ended up doing in Hudson, where there just wasn't enough, where you could see that he couldn't see the field. He didn't know what was going on. And at that point, Sark was like, I can't trust you. Like, I can't put you back out there. That seems to be the thing. But we know, I mean, we saw C.J. Baxter as the number one running back last season, and we saw both of his backups arguably play better than he did. Like, I'm just keeping it real. But his plan was CJ. And this plan, the Jonathan Brooks thing ends up being that thing where you're just like, oh, look at Jonathan Brooks. Look how awesome he is. It's like, yeah, you mean the backup guy who you didn't want as a starter, but he ends up looking great. And Jaden Blue comes in, and Jaden Blue looks really darn good. I think both guys pop a little bit more than CJ did. But the plan was to have CJ, right? So the plan is Quinn. And I think that's exactly what it is. It would take a lot, I think, to deviate from the plan, because I ain't that to gosh, Benji, that's not what he does. But to bring up the graphic from my story that ends up being the thing that I'll probably pop on the screen once every couple of weeks, which is, look, if you go through Texas and you look at the volatility of the position, ain't been nice. Ain't been pretty. And you start in 2009, and it really starts heating up really in 2013 with David Ash and the brain injuries, all the injuries that's, Gerard Herb, you forget about him, the injuries he had, Sam Ellinger, all the injuries that he had, Casey Thompson playing with a hurt thumb, Hudson Card fighting through injuries, and then the injuries from Quinn. Like, these things are real. Like these things are more real than the flu, quite honest with you. And these things are that when we start talking about what Arch needs to do, where Arch needs to be, like Arch needs to be ready. Like the Arch has to be ready. And even if Sark is like, hey man, Quinn's my guy, and there's no quarterback competition, he needs to know the same way Malik Murphy had to know. Like at some point, there's a possibility that you're going to come in. It's not just going to be for a fourth quarter of the game. Might be earlier than you think. It's a possibility you may have to start the season just because of the nature of the position. That guy has to be ready because Malik Murphy isn't ready. Like Malik Catch, I think you agree that Malik Murphy in the 2 games that he played last year, somewhat unimpressive when it's all said and done. The BYU game, I think it was a K-State. You walked away and you just shoulder shrugged. He was like, he's young. It's whatever.
Serviceable, which was good enough.
Serviceable, good enough to get the wins. Wasn't impressive. I don't think you're gonna have the same results for Arch. I don't think you can have Arch looking serviceable. Like when he comes in, everybody's expecting the second coming of a Manning, third coming of a Manning. I guess in this one case, fourth coming or fifth coming. There's a lot of them, and he has to be ready.
Guys, if we shift the conversation away, Bill, if you're out there, you triggered it. We had the conversation. I'm still mystified. Like I guess the Manning thing is the Manning thing, and there will be when Sark next talks to. I would expect he gets a Manning question every media availability he has all year. It is what it is. If we talk about the rest of the team, though, and Alex, I'll start with you on this. I wrote a column about questions that I have about the team. I came up with 20. I'm a question asker. It's what I do. I can find things that you and I are similar, I think, in this way. You can find things that you would be interested in and have questions about that maybe a lot of people wouldn't. Your big question, and I want all of us to have a different answer to this question. So you can take the first piece of puzzle off the table. Your big question right now as spring football starts tomorrow is what?
The first thing I'll watch is just defensive line positioning, alignments, and specifically with the ends. It's the most important thing to me.
Defensive line in general position.
Yeah. I mean, Like I think what I think will happen. I think Alfred Collins will start at the nose. I think that Vernon Broughton will probably start at the defensive tackle, and then what does the depth look like after them? But then, secondly, just how do they fit in Simmons and Moore? Those guys are too good, man. Like both, if it can't be a season where each of those guys isn't playing it. It almost feels like having each of them play 50% of snaps is going to be robbing the team of some production. How do you make that work? How do you make it work? You got Ethan Burke, you got Barron Sorrell, you got, guys who you need to start getting involved, like Colton Vosick and the rest of these dudes. I talked about it on my shows last week, just as I was breaking down the depth charts and the questions I had. A lot of the questions in your column, Catch, was a lot of the same questions I had as I was putting together these depth charts. It's like some of them, if you watch this stuff real closely, it's like there's some questions that just simply need to be answered. Like there isn't enough room. There aren't enough snaps for these two positions to be able to get the guys the reps that they need. And specifically, that means, does Ethan Burke, does he have some position versatility? Can they do some things with maybe taking a few snaps off the table for Barron Sorrell and getting Ethan Burke over there? Do we see different packages, different alignments? Is Colin Simmons a dude who they maybe have something cooked up for, like they did originally for Anthony Hill, right? When we first saw Anthony Hill come in and play, we're like, dude, well, he's going to start from day one in spring. Well, no, he didn't start from day one in spring, but what he did was he was used in all these kind of ancillary roles, and there'd be all these packages where we'd hear about, not even the practices that we were at, practices where we'd hear stuff. They'd be like, Anthony Hill's with the ones. It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, who's he playing in front of, And they say, well, no, like they have this stuff where they bring him off the edge, or do they have things like that planned for Colin Simmons and Trey Moore? it's just there's a whole lot of things as far as the defensive line. And then even as we get farther into that and we get into the meta of that, like I need to know if Alex January really does weigh 324 pounds, right? I want to see what Tia Savea looks like. Like what, he was what 293 on the roster, but what does that 293 look like in the flesh? Like, does he look like he's stout and can hold up against the run? I've never seen what he looks like in person. So, getting to see the guys that I haven't yet seen in person will be important for sure. And, but mainly just those alignments as far as the end, the jack end, the buck end, and how they're going to work that thing out.
Anwar, it's a hell of it says a lot about what Sarkisian's been able to build, that Alex's biggest question, and I don't know that I disagree with him. It's the thing I'm probably most fascinated about is you got so much talent at one position. How do you get them all on the field? And it's certainly not a conversation that we were having about this specific, the edge end position a year ago. What a difference a year makes, where if Ethan Burke doesn't have positional flexibility and isn't playing on the other side, there's actually one hell of a problematic logjam with Burke, Moore, and Simmons all bunched together, not even including Zena, who you reported a couple of weeks ago has been drawing rave reviews for his work in the offseason. These are real wealthy people problems where it's like, we just got too many ends. How do we get them all on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a really interesting proposition, right? Like, because to your point, like how do you get those guys going? But there still is that. It's interesting though. There still is a need for the productivity from that position, right? So I think there is the conversation of, yes, on paper and in theory, these guys on the edge are pretty good. But there's the conversation. Look, we love our guy Barry, right? Catching out, we love us some Barry. But we know Barry was in here beating the drum, talking about double-digit sacks all of last season. Again, I love him. But I think he would even say, you know what? He wants to see more from Barron this season. I think that would be obvious to say. I don't think he would shy away from that. I think Ethan Burke, that's the same conversation to be had from there. Again, it's a lot of there's productivity. There's things that those guys did well, but there are also some things that you want to see a little bit more of. So I think we're looking for that guy, not a guy, but the person's going to be that guy at that position. So I see a lot of good components, right? I don't necessarily see a plethora of riches or plethora for your Three Amigos reference. But there is a plethora. You appreciate that, don't you, Catch? You
I'm smiling.
I appreciate the hell out of it. Yeah, I love it. Rarely will I even get, or even more rarely will I appreciate a movie reference. But yeah, I mean, you talk about the Three Amigos and the plethora of pinatas, dude. I'm gonna love that every time.
But that's not my biggest one, though, Catch. Can I give you my biggest one?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was Alex's one. I'll be honest with you. Mine's is probably a little bit more of the constructive, a little bit more negative from what I'd have to look for. And I don't know if I should just specify just one particular thing, but whether you want to go cornerbacks or DBs or whatever, if I just want to lump it into that, that's kind of what I'm going to be looking at. I think that's kind of my big thing. And look, at the end of the day, the pass defense was horrible last year. Like there's no ways about it. It was one of the worst pass defenses in the country. And yes, Texas was able to go very far. We're not going to deny that, but we also can't deny that this team had a huge glaring weakness, right? And so, I think Travis filled in for Alex last week, and he used a phrase that I love. He said, "But when Michael Penix went into God mode last in that playoff game, the DBs couldn't handle it." And so I'm very interested to see. I mean, there's guys who we love. Like, I think there's guys we love Malik Muhammad, right? I think we all want to see more of him. Jade came back, like, Terrence Brooks. Like, we want to see what those guys do. But I for me, Catch, that to me, that's the secret sauce to making everything go. Like, having these DBs go play better. Terry Joseph. And when I kind of, one of the things I mentioned about him in my column is, at the end of the day, his title is, I think pass game coordinator. And so, like, there's some pressure, I think, on him, not hot seat, but there's still some pressure on him that, hey, that unit has to be better. I think it was ranked 116th on 133 teams last year. What happens in the secondary is something I think I'll be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a guy in the secondary a year ago that had a standout season. I mean, that has to be said. You go through the starters one by one. At the end of the year, they kind of were ready for Ryan Watts to move on. They were ready for Jaron Thompson to move on, literally. Like, Crawford. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up on out of here. He transfers. Crawford, I don't think of as an actual starter, but
he played.
But he did play, and there were times
like 200 snaps or something. Like
he played,
yeah.
And he transfers out. They were unhappy enough with Terrence Brooks that they went out and recruited Muhammad from Washington to potentially come in and compete with him at the starting position. And even though we're all kind of doing cartwheels over Jahdae Barron coming back for another year because he's a good player, I wouldn't say he was very good last year. I think he had a disappointing season. And I think the fact that he came back for yet another year instead of wanting to go pro, and look, Jade's a guy that likes money. He's a guy that would have liked a big NFL contract if he thought that was going to be out there for him. It wasn't there. He felt like he needed to come back for another year. So, other than Malik Muhammad, who's a freshman, and Derek Williams, you kind of go, I don't put a lot of blame on them for what happened a year ago. They're just young kids, and you think the best football for them is in front of them. But everybody else Brooks has got to play better. Barron's got to play better. I'm curious to see what Andrew Makuba looks like. There's a sense that he may be the safety, no pun intended, because he'll be playing safety, but he may be the safety valve, the adult in the room, the grown-up in that defensive backfield that they can trust to be responsible and they can just let him play and not worry about him. I think they juggled worries last year that every time Crawford was on the field, they were kind of scared shitless about what happens when he gets matched up against the wrong guy. Will teams find him and take advantage of him? Alex, there's so much excitement behind the scenes in the secondary, but it's a lot of unproven pieces, especially when we talk about working together and being a plus unit with the personnel grouping they have.
Well, they're gonna be better, right? They're gonna be better. Some of these guys, I hate to say it, but it's addition by subtraction to lose Jaron Thompson and Keaton Crawford and stuff. I mean, it's like, come on. But the stuff of two interesting things. So one, man, Catch, it's funny how during the actual season, it was like we were in this mode of, and I think us in the media as well, and we would observers of the team or analysts of the team or reporters, etc. We realized that the secondary had issues, right? We think back to the Houston game and the crossing routes and the last four plays of the OU game, and there's different kind of touch points in the season that you look back on and you say, "Gosh, that was so bad that game." And we kind of knew it was bad. It was pretty bad, but it wasn't like we were on here every single day. I was doing a show at that point for 2 hours solo a day. Anwar has 3 hours a day for his show, like just having to talk solo. You have your shows. We got all kinds of shows here, right? And even with all that time to fill, it wasn't like we were ever just sitting here just railing on how, this is one of the worst defenses in the country, stuff like this, right? As far as the pass defense. And it wasn't anything that was really touched on by our sources and stuff like that. And now it's funny, now that we get to this spring period, it feels like, and the water's under the bridge, and, the focus during the season wasn't on necessarily the team's deficiencies, but the fact that it was actually a team that had a very successful season and made it to college football playoff, right? That was the talking point. But now as the postmortem occurs, and even from sources that are close to the team, sources with the team, some of the stuff is like, man, we really have to get that secondary stuff cleaned up from last year. You know what I mean? Like, it's like now they've admitted that stuff was actually really, really bad. You know, that's in the public sphere now. Like, that's something that you're allowed to talk about. The other interesting thing is, in keeping with that, something I had in the war room this last week, and it mainly had to do with the conversation I was having with somebody about the linebackers. But an interesting kind of takeaway was that they talked about Nansen being the linebackers coach, and about, he's like, you got to remember, he's the co-defensive coordinator too. And it wasn't like anybody felt like we needed to get rid of Jeff Choate. Everyone loves Jeff Choate, but looking back at last year, like seeing the stuff that he's doing with the secondary, with the linebackers and the secondary, and how he's tying this stuff together and bringing in some of his concepts from Arizona, this person said, like, that was something we could have used last year. Is some of that organization, some of that new kind of critical thinking and theory as far as the DBs and how the DBs interact with the rest of the defense. So I think that the staff recognizes it was an issue. I think that the fans, if they're being honest with themselves, recognize that was an issue from last year. But the two best, the two highest pedigree players on that whole defense, and the two that ended up being the two best by the end of the season, are both coming back, and they both have a long time left at Texas, and Manny Muhammad and Derek Williams. Ketch mentioned Andrew Makuba. Ketch said he's worried about Barron. I'm not worried about Barron. He'll be fine.
I didn't say I was worried about Barron. I said just he needed to play better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, right. All right. So fair enough. I guess I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying my personal feeling is I don't worry about Barron. And then that other corner, Terrence Brooks needs some competition, but it doesn't feel like it. Dude, they're not starting out this season with Jalen Catalon and these. It's like, come on, it's gonna be a different group of guys back there, and I think that there's nowhere to go but up.
Well, I think two things I want to throw in there, Alex, is that we didn't talk a lot about some of the deficiencies that the team was having, because they were, to your point, they were winning.
Yes,
and so I mean, like at that point, I mean, we've done so many shows, and Ketch and I have done so many shows where it was about losing. Like at that point, we're just like, man, a win's a win. Like it don't matter. Like we are not going to sit here on a Monday and nitpick, that Houston win. We're just going to be happy that it was a win, and we're just going to keep it moving. And if they keep winning like this, then if they win ugly, then so be it, right? So there was that. The interesting thing when you talked about the, Nansen and bringing that stuff in, it's funny how life just changes, because it was only a little bit ago that Gary Patterson was getting all the credit for bringing in the new concepts with the DBs, and because they were going to attack from the secondary and bringing in his concept, and that was supposed to be the reason for his success. And so when there was some success 2 seasons ago, it was like, oh my gosh, look at this Patterson stuff that he's brought in. And now it's like, well, we could be doing a little bit different stuff with the DBs. It's just very interesting how year to year, and this is not a knock on you or by any stretch, Alex, but it's just interesting that year to year, now it's like what was praised just a little bit ago is now like, we should do something better, and this is going to be the new thing. Like it's new Coke, and that's interesting.
My big question mark will piggyback off of Alex a little bit. By the way, just so you guys know how easy it is to shop at Rogue Shop, I placed an order using the discount in the last 60 seconds. It's way easier than it probably needed to be. I got myself some cartridges. I got myself some flour. I used the discount code. I'll just remind everybody right now, because I downloaded it. The sponsor of the show is Rogue Shop. And right now, I'll put it up on the screen. You can get a 20% off discount of the indoor THCA hydroponic flower, small or bigs, along with the carts. The THCA, it's right there. God, it looks pretty. And all you got to do is make sure that you use this promo code, OBTHCA20. You get a 20% off discount. Guys, I literally just did it. I just ordered a couple of cartridges, some hydroponic flour. I'm going to be good to go. Richard, get that shipped right now. Right now. I want it tomorrow, if at all possible. Anyway, the sponsor is rogueshop.com, and I just partook in the offer. It was very simple. Part of me wants to talk about the receivers because we've talked about the defensive line. We've talked about the secondary. It's like, God, I think the big question for me is linebacker other than Anthony Hill. You know, if Anthony Hill suffers a high ankle sprain or anything. Anything. No, I'm talking about something. Well, it's a hell of a flu if it's a multi-week flu epidemic.
Yeah.
But if Anthony Hill's not on the field, to me, linebacker suddenly becomes the weakest area of the team by a lot.
It'll be a giant area of opportunity, Catch. You can look at it like that. It'll be a giant area of opportunity.
It will be.
Oh, gosh.
Alex, that's one way to put it. It will be a gigantic area of opportunity.
Yeah.
However, I'm curious about Kendrick Blackshire. I'm curious. I guess I'm not really curious about David Benda. I feel like we know who he is. Good, solid football player. Like, I feel like we know how he'll be used this season. But, man, they brought in that big linebacker class a year ago. A lot of guys. And Anthony Hill was front and center. And, look, he's everything that everybody thought he was going to be. He's probably the best player on this defense right now. But if he's not on the field for any reason at all, what happens to that position in a year when they're in the SEC? I've got questions about, but I don't. I'm gonna go away from linebacker because then it just sounds like the entire show was us questioning every single layer of the defense. I'll go wide receiver, and it's not. I won't go wide receiver in the concern of like it's a major concern. But boy, Alex and I have done shows together. It feels like maybe even last week's Monday Overreaction show when Anwar, you weren't here.
You could do a show a week going through every permutation of this thing.
We
will, by the way.
We will, don't worry.
We will.
We call that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Where's Isaiah Bond going to line up? How good is Matthew Golden? Is Jonte Cook exclusively going to play where Xavier Worthy did? Are they not going to move him around a ton? I mean, is he the X? If either of DeAndre Moore or Ryan Niblett really step up, right, in a way where at the end of the spring we think they're one of the three best, either of them is one of the three best receivers on campus. Does that mean that Bond moves? Like how they arrange these parts together. They have so much talent at wide receiver. And, oh, by the way, are any of the true freshmen, specifically Aaron Butler and, of course, Ryan Wingo, they're here. Are they going to play at a level where in April we're talking about them and thinking about them in their roles in this year's offense in a different way than maybe we are today? I'm just excited to see how that thing plays out. There's a lot of guys that Steve Sarkisian has specifically recruited. He's almost, Ryan Wingo's his guy. No offense to Chris Jackson. I think eventually Chris Jackson will be a guy that doesn't have to rely on the head coach to do all of the heavy lifting. But in year one, Sark was like really involved in Wingo and Butler and the portal guys and all of these players on how it all shakes out and who's in a seat in this game of musical chairs and thus has a definite role in the 2024 offense, and who's left standing up wondering what happens to me this year. Is this am I going to play? I'm fascinated because I think I know, like Alex and I both would tell you, we think we've got some ideas for how this thing might roll out, but one DeAndre Moore or Ryan Niblett stepping up and really grabbing the bull by the horns could change the dichotomy of the entire situation. It's a little bit like defensive end. I can't wait to see how they figure out how they get all the talent on the field.
What's interesting to me, Catch, is that Sark's explanation as to why he went to the transfer portal is that he didn't have enough guys on the roster with experience, that they looked down and they looked at and basically figured out the amount of stops. And it's like, we need to bring in some more veteran guys. So he didn't say to himself, like, I've got these young guys who I feel like are ready to go to take the next step and we'll be fine at that position. So the same way he is with offensive line. Like, they don't mess around with the offensive line in the transfer portal. They feel like even if we were young, we've got enough guys that are there. So it'll be interesting that you brought in these veteran guys because you felt like you needed guys with experience. So then what do you do with the young guys, to your point? Like, what do you do with the Niblets of the world? What do you do with a Jonte, who we all are super high on? But what do you do? You know, what do you do with some of those guys like Moore and Niblett, who might be borderline, right? How do you get those guys in there? And of course, you know, there's still a Ryan Wingo who you talked about, and you know, and hell, Parker Livingstone. I mean, he's just, you know, is he just a guy who's just on the team? This, you know, so it'll be very interesting to see, like, with that room, like he clearly has made it clear that it's important to get the veterans on the field because he needs that experience. But it's often like, Catch, I equate it. It's like trying to get credit when you're young, right? The only way to get credit is for someone to give you credit, but they won't give you credit because they say you don't have it, right? It's like, well, the only way you're going to give me credit is if you give me a line of credit. It's like, yeah, but you don't have any credit. Well, the only way to get playing experience is for someone to give you playing experience, but you can't say, well, yeah, you know why you can't play you? Because you don't have any experience. Like, there has to be some sort of balance into like how you also get those guys on the field at well.
Alex, thoughts? Just we've shared them before, but
yeah, I mean, it's just look. Well, I mean,
who's the guy that you could put a camera on for the entire spring at the wide receiver? If they sold pay-per-view packages per player, you could watch one receiver this spring. Who's your guy?
Jonte.
Yeah.
I'd buy it. I'd buy it for every player that they sell the package for. It would be I would just write it off, right? I'd have old tax saver Steve, write it off of my taxes. But man, yeah, I'd watch Jonte, and I thought the interesting thing would be, because where he's aligning and what he's doing is going to tell the story about how the others are, right? It's like, if we do think, I think right now, I could be dead wrong. We could go and Isaiah Bond's practicing exclusively out of the outside receiver positions, but it feels like in order to get the guys on the field, they need to get on the field. He'll probably start out in the slot. And if Jonte's playing more of like an X type of role, then I think that means we're seeing more Matthew Golden. And that means that he's performing really well out there. If Jonte is practicing in Xavier Worthy's old role at the Z, I think that means that Ryan Wingo will be playing really well out there and needs to be on the football field. So not only do I get to see how Jonte is looking, I get to see where he's aligning, which would give me clues about how the other guys are probably looking. And then the other thing is, with what Anwar said about Parker Livingstone, I'll tell you, like, he's not just like Parker Livingstone is going to be great for Texas one day. I'm a giant fan of that guy. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think right now it's going to be hard for him to get on the football field just because of all these other guys that we're talking about. But eventually, once he gets his chance, I don't think people realize how fast he is, man. He's big and he's fast and he's good. He's got really good hands. So,
does he have to be better than Ryan Wingo, though, this year, next year, and the year after to get on the field?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I do pencil them both in to play the same position, but they are I also see them as different types of players. right? I don't see their skill sets as being exactly the same. So maybe those two guys could be used situationally. Clearly, whenever you look at what Sark does, he typically, since he's been at Texas, has kind of had his top three and then a fourth that can sort of maybe crest into that 25 to 30% snap share, right? I would think that, it would seem like heresy right now to say it about Wingo and to say that Parker Livingstone could overtake him. But I mean, here's the fact of the matter. There are always people that end up kind of surprising you, whether they're not probably as good or they're a lot better than most people thought or the rest of it. So those guys have yet to take a snap that I've seen with my own two eyes at Texas. They have yet to take a snap on an actual Texas football field. So I think that this isn't much of a Parker Livingstone take, except I think he's really good, and that's something that I haven't really talked much about lately. And I just want to remind people that Parker Livingstone's a player that I think is really good and really fast, and that's another dude who, now that Anwar's brought it up, I haven't talked much about that, but I'll be interested in watching how he looks. There's a million things. Man, there's too much to watch at practice, dude. Like
my Parker Livingstone at wide receiver, Anwar, is Ryan Niblett. But the conversation about Niblett is kind of the one we're having about Livingstone and Wingo as well. It's like, well, Texas just recruits that position so well that there's not a free runway for any of these guys, right? I mean, Niblett's got to beat out DeAndre Moore, and DeAndre Moore's got to beat out Niblett. And for most of the last 15 months, I think those two guys have thought, okay, when Whittington is gone, this is the guy that I've got to beat out. And then they blinked and Isaiah Bond showed up, and it was like, wait a minute. Yeah. I thought I just needed to beat this guy out, and now I've got to beat this guy out too. And then it's constantly evolving. And the thing that I think we can almost set our watch on is there will be guys that depart after this season, and Sarkisian will go out and find other badass guys in the portal at wide receiver and add them to the mix. And if you're a young guy, you better be freaking good, because Sark is here to win. This is not show friends. It is show business. And he is going to try to find the best. Because, oh, by the way, Silas Bolden will be here in a few months. And you add him to the mix. And he had the best season in stats of every single player on the roster, including Isaiah Bond, when you look at the productivity a year ago at Oregon State. So, I got no skin in the game. I like to cover a winning team that plays in big games. It's fun, isn't it, Anwar, when we're doing these shows?
Oh yeah, it's much better. It's much better because we've done a lot of bad shows.
And I think Sark feels like I've coached enough bad teams that he ain't gonna bad shows, bad teams. They go together. I just have a sense that the wide receiver position, whatever we think in the spring, will look different in the summer. It'll look different in the fall. And then we'll get to December and think we've got an idea of what it will look like next year. And Sark will shake his head and say, look at what ace I just pulled out of my sleeves that you didn't even know that I had up my sleeve. Factor him in as well. It's a good place to be. We've seen the other side. It was only 2 seasons ago that Sark had Isaiah Nayor get hurt, and then they spent an entire year just trying to find one guy to play opposite Xavier Worthy and never really found the guy that they could count on, hence Adonai Mitchell, maybe hence Sarkisian kind of changing his mindset with regards to how he'll treat that position forevermore. Guys, let's wrap it up.
Before you go, like, would it be interesting, though, just real quick on that one, is from a recruiting perspective, Catch, it don't take much to negative recruit, right? It's just easy. And so if you're recruiting against Texas and you're saying, and this would be interesting when you start talking about who plays when, hey man, Jonte went there and that guy never plays. Ryan Wingo, man, that guy's here. He's going to sit the bench. Those are 5 stars. And you're a 4-star. What do you think is going to happen if you go to Texas? Like, that they're going to bring in Adonai Mitchell. They're going to bring Isaiah Bond in. They're going to bring in all these guys. Like, you're not going to play. So would it be interesting at some point to keep the high school recruiting momentum going, the guys that you do recruit, those guys will have to play and get on the field, because if it's just all about the transfer guys, and look, if it's just all about the transfer guys, that's fine, but you risk losing some and losing something in the high school recruiting department if the stars that you bring in are always getting out recruited.
Well, the nuance to that conversation is like Cook's going to be the guy this year. I mean, if we had more time, I might have even asked the question of, is Jonte Cook about to be the first superstar wide receiver at Texas? That they've had stars, but they haven't yet had one guy just go bananas. Is Cook about to be that guy? And I wonder if and to your point, Anwar, the question may evolve into, it's not that they don't play their recruits, right? Because Jonte Cook may go crazy, but it might be Jonte Cook and Ryan Wingo didn't play much in year one. And if you're a 5-star receiver, do you want to go to a school where 5-star receivers have a hard time getting on the field in year one? It seems like a little thing, right? Because if you play as a sophomore and junior and get drafted high in the NFL, aren't you good? But some of these kids, the very first thing they say in terms of where they want to go to college is, how soon can I play? So it will make, I think, Ryan Wingo or, hey, if Aaron Butler were to like emerge as the guy that plays a lot this year, it would help alleviate those concerns. You'd say, yeah, we're going to bring in portal guys, but look, if you can point to one guy and say that guy came in and had a really excellent freshman season, and now he's set to be a star the next couple of years, it might alleviate that. If they don't, yeah, they may find themselves on the short end of some 5-star recruiting at receiver because of that problem. But I wonder if that's a problem Sarkisian would trade the negative for the positive for. That if every year you're able to bring in an Adonai Mitchell type player, an Isaiah Bond type player, maybe you'll live with that. I'm sure he wants his cake and he wants to eat it too, but sometimes life doesn't allow you to do those things. Alex, any final thought before we sign off?
No, I'm good, man. Just excited about practice. I guess we could talk about it after the show. I don't know. Like, do we have any? Are we gonna have the show tomorrow? I guess practice is gonna be maybe during the show. I don't know. I guess we can talk about it. I'm not sure. What is practice at 9?
Yes, Alex.
Okay. We'll
talk about this after the show. In reality, we will almost certainly have to juggle some pieces and parts, but that's a good problem to have, because football is back tomorrow for all of it's the off season and I need my football fix. Well, you'll get a little piece of that starting tomorrow. Longhorn football practice returns tomorrow. A bunch of new faces on the field. We'll be right here on Orange Bloods Live covering all of it. We'll be at orangebloods.com covering all of it. As a matter of fact, I'll contact the national guys today at Rivals and make sure that starting maybe even later today, but certainly tomorrow and through the rest of the week, we'll have a brand new offer at Orange Blood so that you don't miss anything with regards to spring football coverage. Do us a solid. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, get notifications, all of those things. I don't even know how many thumbs up we've got so far, but we could almost certainly deserve and warrant more. Give us a thumbs up. Come on, it's a click. Smash that bad boy. And thanks to Rogue for being the sponsor of the Overreaction Monday show. Like I said, I literally purchased $100 worth of Rogue products with my 20% discount. I'm going to be feeling good by the end of the week. You guys can feel good too in a lot of different ways. Go check out rogueshop.com. For myself, for Anwar Richardson, for Alex Dunlap, thanks for giving us a little bit of time today for the Overreaction Monday show. We do appreciate it. I'll be back at noon with Chad Hastings, who's back from vacation. I have some questions for Chad. Some of them involve Aggie football. Some of them involve Trev Alberts. We should have a big, fun, full show. So see you in a couple of hours. Until then, you guys get back to work.